Have you here with us, and you understand how this job works, you know, with the pressure that comes with it. Watching what's played out over these last few days, what advice would you give to Speaker Johnson?
He has to remember that he is Speaker of the whole House, and that responsibility is to make sure that the institution itself gets the job done. The people, elected him as Speaker by electing the House Republicans to have the majority. It's a slim majority. We're still in a divided government. And so he has to get the job done. The Congress has the power of the purse. We have a separation of powers for a reason. And so I don't think that having these outside influences that don't have any, they won't be felt the effects of a government shutdown. That's not helpful. And so he has to stay the course of what he can do to get the bill across the finish line. And really any majority, the power they have, especially as Speaker, is their ability to get 218 for a vote.
And you mentioned these outside forces. I have to wonder for John Boehner, if he had an Elon Musk type that was firing off messages on X and kind of dive bombing into these negotiations, what does that do to your leadership, to your power, to how effective you can be?
I don't know that John Boehner would have been tolerating that kind of nonsense. He has a lot of times he would say this isn't past the smell test. And so somebody who doesn't really understand how Congress works, then getting to dictate how Congress works would not really be something that the former speaker would have not only not appreciated, but would have really tolerated. Again, he always would say that his job was to be Speaker of the whole House. And, in his situation, when President Obama wanted to increase the debt ceiling, more or less in a blank check manner, Boehner made it very clear that for any dollar spent, there had to be a dollar of cut, and that became the Boehner rule. So it's very interesting that people are going against Speaker Johnson, saying, how dare he work across the aisle with Democrats, when you now have the former or the soon-to-be President Trump saying that, he wants to abolish and get rid of the debt ceiling, and he'll work with Democrats to make sure that's a possibility. He'll champion that effort with them. So, this hypocrisy here in the Republican Party, they need to figure out what's most important to them moving forward.
How do you think, just to stay on Boehner for a second, how do you think he's watching all of this unfold? Because he's sat in that seat. He's held that gavel.
I'm sure he is pleased not to be part of it right now. But again, he had a different situation and he really held firm in that. And I think there was also this understanding, this underlying faith in leadership, and that there would be an adult in the room that would make sure that we wouldn't default on our debt and make sure that we wouldn't, free fall economically. And so there was that underlying trust, and there was a relationship between working. They disagreed, and there was many fallouts throughout the process. But he and the President Obama realized they had to work together to get this done.
And look, we're about to have another speaker's election coming up on January 3rd. I lived through all of the votes with Kevin McCarthy when I was covering the Hill. We all watched it. It took vote after vote after vote. And then Mike Johnson ultimately down the road assumed that position and was voted in kind of as a surprise to, I think, a lot of people. How do you see that battle playing out? Do you think it will be difficult for him to maintain that power? Or do you think that with the backing, he did get backing from Trump and a nice message from Musk after this was all over, do you think he's in safe territory there?
I think President Trump realizes he needs to have the full chambers working in his favor. So it doesn't serve him to go against Speaker Johnson because, again, as the former congresswoman just mentioned earlier, it was so hard to get Johnson to 218 alone. Who else could do that? But Republicans cost themselves a lot of political capital this week by having this chaos of 48 hours, by having this kind of devolvement of putting us on the brink of a government shutdown, because, it takes away the momentum going into what is going to be a Republican-led House, Senate, and the White House. They could be accomplishing a lot, but by having these infightings that should really be done in private, and instead it's being done publicly by people who don't understand how Capitol Hill works and needs to work in order for it to function properly, which I know it seems almost far-fetched these days for Capitol Hill to work properly, but in light of the fact that we are about to switch governments, it's important that they get in line behind Johnson, at least for what Congress needs to accomplish.
All right, Maura Gillespie, thanks so much for your insight into this. We appreciate it.